Hi! So before I show you the video I've just made, I'm just going to make 3 small apologies. 1 for my voice, which I'm losing a bit. 2 for some jump cuts to cover up the fact I'm losing my voice a bit. And 3, my microphone decided I was no longer worthy to actually use it, so the sound may not be the quality I actually want. I've also made this video available in a transcript format, which will feature the complete transcript and image descriptions if you'd prefer to view it that way. Thank you and enjoy. Hello, my name is Rhiannon Jenkins and I'm an archaeology master student at Cardiff University, and this is my video contribution to the Zooarchaeology Saves the World conference in 2022. After coming across this article published in 2016 by The Independent Online, I really wanted to speak about it. And it wasn't the only article like this. These articles would speak of the need to consume goat meat for both ethical and environmental reasons. The main argument was that around 45,000 baby goats are culled annually to provide the British market with goat's milk and goat's cheese. That's the supply that goes to waste, and avoiding this waste would be the ethical thing to do. All we really needed now was to create a demand for goat's meat. Maybe this could be a better solution for individuals not keen to become vegetarian or vegan and cut meat out entirely. They would advertise companies such as Cabrito and Cotswold Kid Meat, and these are 2 companies that focus solely on supplying this type of meat. Chefs have already addressed the fact that a low demand in the UK affects supply and can make goat very expensive to add to the menu. It's why Cabrito was created. James Wetlow, who was a chef at the time, made Cabrito to package and sell goat meat. But what does zooarchaeology tell us about our goat's consumption here in Britain? The Neolithic is when both sheep and goat would arrive in this Neolithic farming package. We group both these animals together as they're skeletally quite similar. This has its problems though. I personally think one of the biggest flaws in British zooarchaeology is when we use these tripolar or other types of graphs. We tend to put sheep, goat or the caprine section, which makes it seem like an assemblage has an equal number of both animals, which just isn't true. And the studies we've conducted using better methods have shown that sheep dominate these categories, and our understanding of goat in these assemblages is often ignored. The first example of goat consumption we found as archaeologists was the direct consumption of dairy. At the Neolithic site of Hambledon Hill, an individual's dental calculus was found to have a small part of a protein in it called a peptide. This peptide is unique to goat's dairy, and this is the perfect example of direct evidence of someone having goat's milk or cheese. But ultimately, evidence of goat meat consumption is rare in our archaeological record. The most well-known example of a large assemblage of goat comes from the Roman temple site at Uli, where goats were raised for slaughter, probably more for ritual purposes. Many sites through the Roman and medieval periods have shown evidence of both hornworking and evidence of isolated foot bones, and this is normally associated with skins and skinning. I don't want to make the argument that nobody ate goat meat, but there is a lack of evidence that points to it being a rarity. This may have been because goat was difficult to farm. To start with, Britain is really wet, and goats, unlike sheep, do not produce any natural waterproofing. You could argue that they have a benefit in how flexible their diet is. They tend to consume a whole lot of weeds that other animals would avoid. But goats eat anything, and they're going to eat the enclosures you've left them in. That's why our wild goats are descendants of goats that have escaped their enclosures to run free. We have the examples of both the British primitive goat and the Kashmiri goat we saw terrorising a small town in Wales during lockdown. If you look at medieval manuscripts, they tend to show goats on hills running free and sheep enclosed. Goat meat is also somewhat difficult to cook. It doesn't suit being grilled or put in a pan, and most recipes dedicate around 3 hours to let it stew. You can't really roast it. We got more cooking technology than people of the past did, and things such as a slow cooker might work to make it easier to cook, but we still don't have an appetite for it. Part of a Europe-wide study from 2020 gave multiple reasons why people avoided goat meat, including a stronger smell and a strong taste, and it wasn't part of their family habits. Back to Britain in 2022, and one of my first issues with these articles. In African, Jamaican, Caribbean and Sri Lankan communities, goat is still a part of the diet. Accounts of modern history highlight the arrival of the Empire Windrush ship in 1948, and this was the beginning of a more organised settlement of Britain by families from these communities. And this is in turn when local shops and markets began selling things such as saltfish, spices that weren't previously available, and obviously goat meat. It's obviously grown a bit in popularity since then, with chain restaurants such as Turtle Bay serving a goat curry on their menu. Articles pushing for this goat meat to be consumed have left out the fact that there's already a big demographic that eats goat meat. It's just that demographic might not want to pay £25 or £30 a kilogram for something that is reasonably priced in the local market that's been supplying them all this time. This demographic is also completely ignored in a lot of these articles, with only some of them having a mere sentence that even mentions that they eat it. Before I recorded this video on the 12th of April, Cabrito, the company that supplies goat meat, successfully crowdfunded efforts to bring the meat onto the supermarket shelves, and this is to hit a different demographic. It's now said we will be seeing the arrival of goat meat in supermarkets in 3 years' time. Cabrito already has a market online and has successfully sold goat meat to restaurants and directly to consumers. The Sustainable Restaurant Association's Peter Hemingway has already warned us that if making the demand is not managed, the UK will begin just another high-carbon meat industry, and any benefit to the consumption of goat meat is lost completely. The meat industry has become this big, unstoppable, uncaring machine, and Peter Hemingway is completely right to warn us that we could just create a demand for goat meat, and this might become like balancing an ethical tightrope. For example, before the pandemic hit in 2020, British suppliers ignored the rise of veganism and vegetarianism and decided to sell their meat abroad, and this ended up slaughtering more animals. During the pandemic and even now, the reality of how the meat industry and probably the whole food industry was really shown to us. Farming animals for meat is a continuous cycle, and disruptions in the supply chain will normally result in a culling and a sale elsewhere rather than any meaningful disruption to the supply. Goat meat is never going to replace beef, it's never going to replace pork, lamb or chicken. And when we propose a more ethical meat, we actually run the risk of it becoming another animal put through the intense farming cycle. When we as zooarchaeologists look to the past, we can see a more ethical system of agriculture and animal farming that doesn't destroy the planet. And we obviously want to take the examples of the past forward, but there are complications. We may not hold enough power as consumers to stop these markets growing and growing. Cabrito is a business and wants to make money, but its push into supermarkets which have many ethical problems themselves, including massive amount of food waste. Cabrito was founded to tackle a type of food waste and may end up contributing to it. My conclusion for all this currently is that goat meat isn't an absence. It's here, it's easy to find if you really want to eat it, but it should not be marketed to the masses.